no record company wanted to touch that. Called us the Queenston Trio.
Split the tree. There was a man.
Legendary singer Linda Ronstadt just dropped a bombshell that's shaking the music world to its core. In a rare, unfiltered moment, the iconic voice behind countless hits boldly named the 5 musicians she absolutely cannot stand. And the list is as shocking as it is savage. From past collaborators to unexpected industry giants, no one saw these names coming. Was it personal, professional, or pure rock and roll revenge? Grab your popcorn, because we're diving deep into the drama behind Ronstadt's brutally honest revelations. The Hidden Hurt, Linda Ronstadt's unspoken story. For more than 50 years, Linda Ronstadt has stood as one of music's most cherished voices. Her songs crossed genres, from rock to country, pop to opera, and her voice, rich and soaring, became the soundtrack to millions of lives. Fans admired her not only for her vocal power and versatility, but for the magical collaborations she had with some of the biggest names in the industry. To many, she seemed unstoppable, a true icon in every sense. But behind the dazzling stage lights and sold-out concerts, Linda carried a quieter, darker story, one that she rarely spoke about, even to those closest to her. For years, she endured not just the everyday struggles of fame, but deep personal wounds inflicted by people she trusted and worked with. These weren't just creative disagreements or moments of career tension. They were life-altering betrayals, the kind that left scars hidden far beneath the surface of her public success. Now, in a move no one expected, Linda has broken decades of silence. For the first time ever, she is naming the 5 people who hurt her the most during the height of her career. These are not random individuals. They were key figures in her rise to fame. People who stood beside her on stage and behind the scenes, shaping not only the music the world came to love, but also the personal journey that few truly understood. Each of these 5 stories is different, and each one stings with its own kind of heartbreak. One was a fellow artist who used her trust as a stepping stone, only to shut her out when she needed him most. Another was a manager whose promises of protection hid quiet sabotage. A producer she once called a genius turned out to be emotionally manipulative behind closed doors. A friend became a rival. A collaborator became a ghost. These stories, Linda admits, were ones she planned to carry silently to her grave. For years, she believed that sharing them would do more harm than good, to herself, to others, and to the legacy she had worked so hard to build. But with time and reflection, something changed. I owed it to myself to be honest, finally, before it's too late, she says. The result is more than just a confession. It's a revelation that shakes the very image of the golden age of rock and roll. The seamless harmonies, the flawless duets, the picture-perfect camaraderie so often portrayed in album covers and magazine spreads. All of it now feels different when viewed through the lens of Linda's truth. This isn't just about naming names. It's about reclaiming a voice that was silenced in quiet, painful ways, even while the world cheered her on. It's a reminder that even the brightest stars often shine through hidden storms. Linda's decision to speak out changes everything. It invites us to look deeper, not just at her career, but at the hidden costs of fame, the human side of the legends we thought we knew, and the power of telling your story, no matter how long it takes. As for Neil Young, what evoked the animosity between Linda and her? Let's look into their relationship. Neil Young's bitter betrayal. Linda Ronstadt had always held Neil Young in the highest regard. To her, He wasn't just another rock star, he was a fearless voice for the voiceless, a champion of peace, someone unafraid to stand against the tide. His bold anti-war lyrics and his unwavering support for marginalized people had made a deep impression on her. She saw in him a kindred spirit, someone who used music not just to entertain, but to stand for something greater. So when they were both slated to perform at a 1976 benefit concert in support of immigrant workers, Linda was thrilled. This was a cause close to her heart, and she felt proud to share the stage with an artist she had looked up to for so long. But that admiration came crashing down in one painful moment. When the time came to plan their performances, Linda suggested singing songs that, though soft and emotional, carried deep meaning. Tracks like Desperado and Blue Bayou. These weren't loud protest anthems, but they told stories of heartbreak, longing, and quiet struggle. She believed these songs could touch people's hearts and move them just as powerfully. Neil, however, didn't see it that way. He dismissed her suggestions outright, scoffing at them and calling them salon music, as if they were fluffy, decorative pieces unworthy of serious attention. He didn't just disagree, he mocked. And in that instant, Linda felt something break. To her, this wasn't just about song choices. It was about being told, indirectly but unmistakably, that her voice didn't matter, that she didn't belong in the movement unless she conformed to someone else's definition of what protest looked like. Because she didn't shout her message, it wasn't worth hearing. What stung even more was what followed. Linda was left out of the set. While others went on to perform, she stood backstage, sidelined, not because she lacked talent, but because someone decided she didn't fit. It felt like being erased, and worse, being patronized, as if her expression, her artistry, her very presence was somehow less valid. Later, Neil took public jabs at female artists who didn't tackle heavy political issues in their music. He didn't name names, but Linda knew exactly who he meant. The insult landed hard. It wasn't just a one-time slight. It was part of a pattern, a subtle yet persistent belief that women in music were only truly valuable when they mirrored men's methods and messages. Anything gentler, more nuanced, or feminine was seen as weak or irrelevant. Years down the line, Neil reached out with an apology, but by then, the damage was done. Linda never responded. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. She had been pushed aside, not by physical force, but by an attitude that saw her worth only through a narrow, male-defined lens. To her, Neil Young had come to symbolize a kind of masculinity that expected women to stay quiet unless invited to speak, and she was done waiting for permission. She never forgave him, and perhaps she didn't have to. Her legacy, built on her own terms, spoke louder than any words ever could. Another difficult relationship was that which existed between three friends. Who are they? Let's find out. Linda Ronstadt with Dolly Parton and Emmylou Harris. In the ever-changing world of music, friendships can be both magical and fragile. Linda Ronstadt found this out the hard way through her deep bond with two fellow legends, Dolly Parton and Emmylou Harris. Linda never had many close friends in the music industry, but her relationship with Dolly and Emmylou was different. It felt like family. Their connection was rare and powerful, a true sisterhood formed not just through shared talent, but through mutual trust and genuine affection. That bond led to something unforgettable, the Trio album in 1987. When their voices came together on that record, it was more than harmony. It was heart. The album was a massive success, not only commercially, but emotionally. showing the world what could happen when friendship and music collided in the best way. But as time passed and life pulled each of them in different directions, cracks quietly formed beneath the surface. When they came back together years later to work on Trio 2, things weren't the same. Dolly, dealing with personal and scheduling challenges, asked to have her vocals removed from some tracks. Linda and the producers agreed, thinking they were doing the right thing. However, when the album finally came out, Dolly wasn't pleased. Something about how it had all been handled didn't sit right with her. There were no angry public statements, no harsh words, just silence. And that silence, soft, heavy, and unspoken, would stretch on for years. For Linda, that silence was harder to bear than any fight would have been. She didn't feel angry at Dolly for stepping away. She understood that people have to make tough decisions. But what hurt was that there was no conversation, no chance to explain, no moment to clear the air. A friend she once trusted enough to sing with, in perfect, effortless harmony, had suddenly become distant, and Linda didn't understand why. She shared her feelings quietly with Emmylou in 2005. She said she was never mad, just sad that Dolly seemed to believe the worst without ever asking her what really happened. All it might have taken was a simple talk, a few words, a little trust. But instead, assumptions were made, and silence grew into distance. Years later, they saw each other again at an awards event. There were smiles, warm hugs. But something was different. Something precious, once full of joy and music, had quietly slipped away. Linda still respected Dolly's talent, her spirit, her genius. But the closeness, the easy laughter and shared understanding was gone. Linda's story isn't one of bitterness or blame. It's a quiet, personal reflection on how even the strongest friendships can fade. Not from betrayal or big drama, but from the slow, aching weight of silence where understanding should have lived. She once wrote, "Some people are worth keeping, but we don't always get the time to keep them properly. Sometimes, all it takes to lose something beautiful is the absence of a conversation. And sometimes, that loss lingers longer than the music ever could." What about Mick Jagger? What made their friendship turn sour? Let's delve into the details. Mick Jagger. In the flashy, fast-living world of 1980s rock and roll, performing with the Rolling Stones was the kind of opportunity most artists could only dream about. Sharing the stage with one of the biggest bands on the planet was supposed to be a badge of honor, a moment to shine among legends. For Linda Ronstadt, a powerful voice in her own right, and one of the most respected female artists of her time, it should have been just that. But instead of a highlight, it became one of the lowest points in her career. And it all started with Mick Jagger. Linda had been invited to perform at a major charity concert, an all-star event packed with rock royalty. At first, it felt like a genuine honor. But from the very beginning, she noticed something didn't feel right. During rehearsals, a photo of her next to Mick was sent out to the press. Yet, instead of being introduced as a fellow headliner or collaborator, Linda was quietly labeled a guest vocalist. Her name was missing, her role minimized, and worst of all, she hadn't even been told about the photo or how it would be used. That photo didn't just erase her credit, it erased her presence, and it hurt. Still, Linda was no stranger to the male-dominated world of rock. She'd worked hard to build a career in an industry where women often had to fight twice as hard for half the respect. She decided to stay quiet, hoping things wouldn't get worse. But they did. Not long after, Linda and Mick found themselves on the same popular talk show. The cameras were rolling, the audience was buzzing, and then, without warning, Mick threw out a biting comment, aimed straight at her. "She looks better when she's not singing," he joked, smirking. The audience burst into laughter. Linda didn't. She sat in stunned silence, not because the comment hurt her ego, but because of what it revealed. It wasn't just a cheap joke. It was a reminder that in the world she worked in, women were often seen as decorations, not artists. Their talent was often ignored or downplayed, while their looks were put under a spotlight they never asked for. This wasn't just personal, it was systemic. But the story didn't end on that stage. Later, Mick approached her again, this time with an offer. He was working on a solo album and wanted her to sing on a track. It could have been a career boost, but there was a catch. He casually suggested she might consider sexing up her image, maybe tighter clothes, something flashier, more skin. Linda didn't blink. She said no. She didn't get this far by being someone else's accessory. She had earned her place with raw talent, hard work, and authenticity. She wasn't about to trade that in for a flashier costume or someone else's fantasy of what a female artist should be. For Linda, this wasn't just a bad experience with a famous rock star. It was a painful glimpse into the deeper issues woven into the fabric of the music industry, a world that often polished women up, used them for the show, and tossed them aside when they didn't fit the image. Mick Jagger, to many, symbolized fame, freedom, and rock and roll excess. But to Linda, he came to represent something else. A system that often valued image over integrity, and saw women as ornaments instead of equals. What she saw behind the scenes of the glitter and fame changed her forever, and she refused to ever play along. Another musician on the list is Frey. Let's dig into the details of what transpired between Linda and Frey. Frey and the erasure of a legacy. Most people know the Eagles, the band that gave us unforgettable classics like Hotel California and Take It Easy. Their music became the soundtrack of a generation, but few remember where they really began. Before the stadium tours and platinum records, the Eagles were not headliners. They weren't even a band yet. They were just a group of skilled musicians backing up a rising star, Linda Ronstadt. Linda wasn't desperate or lacking talent. In fact, she was already turning heads with her powerful voice and stage presence. She chose those young men not because she needed them, but because she saw something in them. She recognized potential where others saw just another collection of guitar players and harmony singers. She wasn't just hiring a backup band, she was investing in them. One of them was Frey. At the time, he was a name few people recognized, a promising musician with big dreams but no big break. Linda noticed something special in him: his dedication, his sense of teamwork, and his sharp musical instincts. She gave him and the others a stage, an audience, and a chance to grow. That opportunity would become the launchpad for the Eagles. With Linda's support, they didn't just grow, they soared. The Eagles quickly evolved from her backup band into a world-famous rock group. Their sound caught fire, and their names became known across the globe. And as their fame exploded, something else happened too, a quiet distancing from the woman who first believed in them. The turning point came years later during a highly anticipated Eagles reunion performance. Fans were thrilled. It was supposed to be a celebration of their journey. But Linda was nowhere to be found. Not invited, not even mentioned. And when questions arose about her absence, Glenn's response was cold and final. The past, he said, was no longer relevant. For Linda, it wasn't about clinging to fame. It wasn't about wanting credit. It was about truth, about being cut out of a story she had helped write, about being erased from a moment that wouldn't have existed without her. To her, it felt like a betrayal, not just of memory, but of the bond they once shared. When Glenn Frey died in 2016, tributes poured in. His legacy was honored, his impact celebrated. Linda stayed silent for a while, but when she finally spoke, it wasn't with anger. It was with quiet sadness. "I thought we were allies," she said. Just 6 words, but they carried years of disappointment and the pain of being forgotten. This isn't just a story about music. It's a story about loyalty, memory, and the complicated ways people drift apart once success enters the room. It's about how some people rise, not on their own, but on shoulders they later pretend they never stood on. And it's about those, like Linda, who refuse to forget. Because sometimes, the ones who open the door are left standing in the hallway. The next on the list is Joni Mitchell. How did their friendship hit the drain? Let's find out. Joni Mitchell. Linda Ronstadt had long admired Joni Mitchell. It wasn't just Joni's remarkable voice that captured Linda's attention. It was the way Joni wrote her own songs, created her unique sound, and fiercely controlled her artistic direction. This was something Linda deeply respected and secretly envied. While Joni had the power to shape her music, Linda had always been a performer, interpreting and bringing others' songs to life, rather than composing her own. There was something about Joni's artistic independence that struck a chord in Linda's heart. It was a freedom Linda wished she could experience, but never had. In 1979, Linda had the opportunity to honor Joni's talent by covering one of her most beloved songs, River, during a Rolling Stone concert. The crowd's reaction was electric, and their appreciation of the song's raw emotion was undeniable. But Joni's reaction was not nearly as warm. From Joni's perspective, it seemed like Linda's version of the song wasn't enough. Afterward, Joni made a sarcastic remark, pointing out the irony of how popular her own song had become, despite it being so deeply personal and vulnerable. Linda was taken aback, feeling as though Joni's comment dismissed the care and emotion she had put into her performance. Weeks later, in an interview, Joni took another jab at Linda, making a pointed comment about how no one could truly convey the depth of her songs unless they had lived through the same experiences. Linda was stung by this remark. It wasn't just a simple critique. It felt like a rejection of her entire artistry, as though her interpretation of Joni's music wasn't worthy of recognition. Linda had hoped that as fellow women, they could understand each other's struggles and artistic journeys, but Joni's words left her feeling isolated and misunderstood. This incident left a lasting scar. Linda chose not to speak about Joni in public again, and she made the conscious decision to avoid performing Joni's songs in the future. The hurt ran deeper because, at the time, Linda believed Joni would be the one person who would understand her position in the music world. Instead, she felt dismissed by someone she had once viewed as a kindred spirit. To Linda, the sting was sharper because Joni was a woman, someone who had carved out her own path in the male-dominated music industry, a path Linda admired but was never able to fully walk herself. Linda reflected on the incident years later, revealing that what she valued most in her collaborators was not just talent, but kindness. "I work with people who have both talent and kindness," she said. "For me, one is not enough." This statement spoke volumes about the lesson Linda had learned from the painful encounter with Joni, that true artistry goes beyond technical ability. It requires empathy, support, and an understanding that creativity can thrive in an environment where kindness and mutual respect are at the heart of the work. For Linda, The experience with Joni Mitchell became a pivotal moment in her career, a reminder that while talent is important, the emotional and human side of collaboration is just as vital. The pain of being rejected by a fellow female artist never fully left her, but it also strengthened her resolve to surround herself with people who valued not just her voice, but her humanity. In the end, it was this combination of talent and kindness that defined her relationships and her career in the music industry. What was Linda's experience in relationships like? Let's dig into this aspect of her personal life. Romance, reinvention, and resilience. In the early 1970s, Linda Ronstadt's romantic life quietly stepped into the spotlight when she began dating fellow musician J.D. Souther. Their bond was more than personal. It was musical too, as Souther helped produce her 1973 album, Don't Cry Now. But as her fame grew, so did public curiosity about her private world. By the mid-1970s, Linda's love life was no longer just a whisper among fans. It became front-page news. This was largely due to her high-profile romance with Jerry Brown, then the governor of California and a rising star in the Democratic Party. Their relationship wasn't just Hollywood gossip. It captured national attention. In April 1979, the couple appeared side by side on the cover of Newsweek, a rare and powerful image of politics and pop culture colliding. Soon after, their faces graced the covers of People and Us Weekly, sparking endless speculation and fascination. But love wasn't always easy for Ronstadt. In 1983, she had a brief but well-known romance with a young and up-and-coming comedian, Jim Carrey. Their relationship lasted about 8 months, though their busy lives eventually pulled them apart. Later that same year, another chapter began, this time with Star Wars creator George Lucas. Their engagement lasted several years, from late 1983 to 1988. Though the two shared a deep connection, they never made it to the altar. In spite of these significant relationships, Linda never married. In a refreshingly honest interview back in 1974, she explained her dilemma. You meet someone kind, but they're not musically inspiring. Then you meet someone who takes your breath away with their creativity, but they're impossible to live with. And then comes the hardest part of all, finding someone who can even tolerate you. Her candidness only added to her allure, a woman unapologetically complex and committed to her truth. In December 1990, Linda made a life-changing decision. She adopted a baby girl named Mary Clementine. 4 years later, she welcomed a son, Carlos, into her family. With her children in mind, Ronstadt began to reimagine what home meant. Though she had lived in Los Angeles for 3 decades, the city had started to suffocate her. I never felt like I belonged in Southern California, she later said. The air, the freeways, the obsession with fame and wealth, it just wasn't who I was. She moved to San Francisco in the late 1980s, seeking space, clarity, and peace. Then, in 1997, she returned to her roots in Tucson, Arizona, to raise her children in a place that felt grounded and familiar. In 2009, the Martin Guitar Company honored her legacy by creating the Linda Ronstadt Limited Edition acoustic guitar. True to her values, she donated the proceeds to the Land Institute, supporting sustainable farming. Her 2013 memoir, Simple Dreams, offered fans a closer look into her journey. That same year, she made a heartbreaking revelation. She had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which had taken away her ability to sing. By 2019, doctors updated her diagnosis to progressive supranuclear palsy, a rarer, more aggressive condition. Despite everything, Ronstadt remains a deeply thoughtful person. She describes herself as a spiritual atheist, someone who finds meaning beyond traditional religion while still embracing awe and introspection. Her life, like her voice, defies easy labels: bold, tender, independent, and forever unforgettable. But let's delve into the details of the silent strength of Linda Ronstadt, a legacy she would always be remembered for. The silent strength, Linda's legacy of quiet defiance. Throughout her legendary career, Linda Ronstadt became known for her incredible voice, one that could convey both power and vulnerability in a way that few others could match. Yet, what stands out even more than her vocal ability is her quiet strength and determination in the face of betrayal and adversity. Rather than seeking revenge or indulging in public drama, Linda took a much more subtle but far more powerful approach. She chose to walk away from situations where her talent, dignity, and rightful place in the music world weren't being respected. Her decision to leave certain toxic relationships and situations behind wasn't a sign of weakness, as some might have interpreted it. Rather, it was a statement of strength and self-respect. She wasn't someone who needed to fight for the spotlight or engage in the petty ego games that often define the music industry. Instead, she carved her own path, refusing to allow anyone else to dictate her value or worth. One of the most notable examples of this quiet defiance came during her time with the Eagles. Glenn Frey, one of the band's key members, played a significant role in the band's rise to fame, yet he seemed to downplay Linda's own contributions to their success. Instead of fighting for recognition or publicly calling out this slight, Linda simply stepped away, choosing not to be part of an environment where her talent wasn't fully acknowledged. Another example was her time working with Neil Young, one of the most respected figures in rock music. Although they had a close musical partnership, Young often minimized her contributions to their work together, leaving Linda feeling unheard and undervalued. But rather than lashing out or seeking validation, she once again chose to step back, removing herself from situations where her artistry wasn't fully appreciated. Perhaps the most infamous incident of betrayal came when Linda performed with Mick Jagger, the iconic frontman of the Rolling Stones. On stage, Jagger belittled her, making her the target of his sharp humor and undermining her talents in front of a live audience. Instead of engaging in confrontation, Linda maintained her composure and silence, refusing to be drawn into a public spectacle. She chose not to let his ego or the cruelty of the moment shape her perception of herself. What these moments show is that Linda's silence was not born from defeat or passivity. It was her way of reclaiming her power and standing firm in her own self-worth. She didn't need the approval of others, nor did she need to win some battle of egos. Linda understood that true strength didn't come from fighting for attention or recognition. It came from knowing your own value and refusing to settle for anything less than that. Throughout these challenges, Linda continued to sing, not for the approval of critics, not for fame, and certainly not for the validation of those who sought to belittle her. She sang for herself, for the pure joy of music, and for the fulfillment of her own artistic vision. In doing so, she demonstrated that the most lasting form of rebellion isn't always loud or confrontational. It can simply be choosing to keep moving forward, on your own terms, in your own way. Linda Ronstadt's legacy isn't just defined by the countless hits she produced or her incredible vocal range. It is also marked by her quiet refusal to let others diminish her worth. Her journey is one of survival, resilience, and the power of silently reclaiming what others tried to take from her. In the end, that quiet defiance became her greatest strength, and that is what truly made her a legend. What do you think about the 5 most hated musicians to Linda Ronstadt? Are they really worth hating? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.